In this lesson, we learned to identify polynomials. We learned about different types of polynomials. We learned how to put them in standard form and how to identify the leading coefficient and what degree each polynomial was. Then we also learned to add and subtract polynomials. So in the family of polynomials, we have several different types that we talk about. We talk about monomials and binomials and trinomials. And then if it gets larger than that, we call everything just a polynomial. So monomials are things like numbers themselves. 5 would be a monomial, 1/2 would be a monomial. Also, the product of numbers and variables. So something like 5x would be a monomial, or 6x squared y would be a monomial. When we look at monomials, we never see variables in the denominator. We also don't see variables underneath square roots. These are the kind of things that monomials look like. A binomial is when we add two monomials together. So mono we know means 1, and bi means 2. So something like the monomial x plus the monomial 5. X plus 5 would be a binomial. 2x squared minus y is also a binomial. Anytime we have those with two parts. And then a trinomial is going to have 3 parts. So something like x squared plus 4x minus 9 would be a trinomial. We see it has 3 monomials that are combined with either addition or subtraction. Now, once we've learned what polynomials are, we talk about writing polynomials in standard form. And in standard form, we write our polynomial from highest exponent to lowest exponent. So for standard form, one example would be the one I've written up here, x squared plus 4x minus 9. That's in standard form. It might be 3x to the 5th plus 2x minus 1. That would also be in standard form. Once it's in standard form, we can identify what the highest exponent is. And for this one, it's 5. That means that this is a 5th degree polynomial. Whatever that highest exponent is there is going to tell us what degree our polynomial is. Now that rule changes if we have more than one variable together, like if you have an x and a y together in your monomial, but we won't be looking at those in this section. The other thing I mentioned we would be looking at is the leading coefficient. Once your polynomial is in standard form, that coefficient that's at the front is your leading coefficient. Sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's a fraction, but whatever that coefficient is your leading coefficient. So for this one, our leading coefficient would be the number 3. Once we talked about this, we learned how to add and subtract polynomials. And for the most part, you've already done something that looks like this. You just called it something like adding like terms. So if we have 3x plus 2 plus 3 minus 5x, we're going to add these two quantities together. Now, since there's nothing to distribute into the parentheses, we can go ahead and drop those parentheses and then combine our like terms. We know we can only add like things, so I can only add x's to x's and constant terms to constant terms. So 3x minus 5x would be negative 2x, and 2 plus 3 is 5. We're always going to check our final answer to make sure it's in standard form, and this one is. This one is a binomial. It's a first degree because the highest exponent is a 1, and its leading coefficient is negative 2. Now for our next example, we're going to do subtraction. So we've got 3x squared minus 2x plus 4, and we're going to subtract x squared plus 2x minus 4, minus 5. Let's change that a little bit. Now one of the things we learned to do, here we see we have a subtraction sign, is we learned that when you're subtracting, one of the ways to do that is to add the opposite. So we're going to take the opposite of our second set of parentheses and add it to what we began with. So we had 3x squared minus 2x plus 4, and we're now going to add the opposite of what we wanted to subtract. So x squared becomes negative x squared, the positive 2x becomes negative 2x, and the minus 5 becomes positive 5. You might have heard this as distributing the negative. That's another way that this is taught. We're just adding the opposite either way. Then we're going to combine our like terms. So 3x squared plus a negative x squared is 2x squared. Negative 2x plus a negative 2x is negative 4x. Be careful with those and look to see if they cancel and make 0 or if they need to combine together. Our last one, positive 4 and positive 5, adds to positive 9. Our answer here is in standard form because we have the x squared and then x to the first, and then this 9 would technically have an x to the 0, even though we don't say that. That 9 is our constant term. Our leading coefficient is 2, and this is a second degree polynomial.